yesterday's news.
Hello, welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. Visitor numbers, I thought this week, something we've looked at before, I believe, but there's been a recent claim that we're on target to have around 500,000 visitors, I think, per year, 500,000 by the 2030s, and we are growing our visitor numbers. I'm ahead of the game, it might seem, which sent me scurrying back as usual to take a look in the papers with a few thoughts on visitor numbers. An interesting one came up if you put in visitors and visitor numbers from the Mona's Herald, Wednesday, September the 10th, 1851. Now, with no reference to what or where, there's a piece just titled The Crystal Palace, Diurnal Numbers and Receipts, and then proceeds to give quite a long list of those. Monday, the 105th day, the visitors numbered 50,233. Season tickets, £8, 10 shillings at the door. £2,465, 10 shillings. Total receipts, 2,474. On Tuesday, the number of visitors were 49,866. Season tickets, £1, 10 shillings at the doors, etc., etc., and on it goes. I can only assume this is the Crystal Palace in London, the Great Exhibition, but quite why it was in the Mona's Herald, I don't know, bearing in mind that straight after that there's a wonderful piece about the herring fishery and how the blessings of the sea for the season thus far have been very abundant, on the Isle of Man, of course. Intriguing. We skip to the Times, Wednesday, April the 24th, 1889. Eastertide in Douglas. Rather timely, it would seem. Douglas, we read, has been visited this Easter by the largest number of tourists ever known at this season of the year. The steamers Snaefell and Ben Macree brought about 1,000 persons on Thursday last. The Peveril carried 500 here on Good Friday. On Saturday, the Snaefell brought 400, and the day trip from Liverpool on Bank Holiday by the Ben was patronised by 450 persons. The Peveril also brought a fair number of passengers on the same day. The weather during the holidays was exceedingly fine, with the exception of Good Friday, which was a cold, raw day with a fierce wind and rough sea. Good to see some things don't change. Some complaints were made that the Steam Packet Company did not put on a larger boat than the Peveril on Friday. Again, good to see some things don't change. Most of the 500 passengers were ill, and the nasty weather, combined with the crushing on the vessel itself, rendered the passage most disagreeable. Oh dear. On the other days, however, the visitors took full advantage of the fine weather, and Douglas presented the appearance usually noticeable in the summer months. The promenade and the Victoria Pier were crowded, particularly during the arrival and departure of the steamers. Several thousand persons assembled on the Victoria Pier to witness the departure of the Ben Macree on Monday afternoon, with about 1,000 visitors on board. And the cheers given by the returning trippers as the vessel left the pier showed how heartily they had enjoyed their brief holiday here. Don't think that happens anymore, does it? The day trip from Douglas to Liverpool on Monday was patronised by around 400 persons, and a large number of visitors enjoyed a sail around the island in the steamer Snaefell on Bank Holiday. Of course, large numbers of small boats and several sailing yachts were brought out from their winter resting place for the holidays, and their owners secured a fair share of business in this direction. Craftily done. The railways during the holidays were exceedingly well used, and perhaps surprisingly for 1889, we hear a large number of cars were brought into requisition as well by the visitors. So what, you hired a car perhaps? I don't know. Interesting. 1889. You wouldn't think there would be that many cars on the Isle of Man, would you, at first thought? Let's skip to 1903, the Isle of Man Times, Saturday, September the 19th. Our visitors numbered, we read. From the official figures of the arrivals of passengers on the island, made up to the end of July, it appears that there was an increase in the number of visitors to Douglas of nearly 4,000 as compared with the previous highest record in the year 1901. At Ramsey, the increase was 10,000, but this is largely attributable to the encampment of volunteers at Luaig. We append the exact figures as made up to the 31st of July in each of the 3 last years. And so we read in Douglas, 1901, the number was 163,151. In 1902, 142,259. And in 1903, 167,094. But this is just to the end of July, of course, so it's just that month, I assume. In Ramsey, the figures for 1901, 5,876. In 1902, 5,378. And in 1903, 15,804. We turn to the Examiner, Friday, February the 12th, 1937. The season's programme. June Effort Committee's aspirations. Visitors, 600,000. So a similarish number to the number we're aiming for now. Well, I say similar, 100,000 higher. Subscriptions, £2,500. Visitors numbering at least 600,000. These subscriptions from the public of at least £2,500. These are the 1937 aspirations of the June Effort and Season Extension Committee. What a great committee name. Whose secretary, Mr. J. Stanley Kermode, has just prepared an attractively worded appeal for circulation throughout the town. The minimum subscriptions aimed at are required for the promotion of the following events during the season. The London to Isle of Man Air Race. That's not going anymore, is it? Saturday, May the 29th. The Manx Air Derby, Monday, May the 31st. The Manx International Bicycle TT Race, Thursday, June the 24th. That's bicycle race. Highland Gathering, Monday, July the 19th. Physical training classes on the shore each day from the end of June to early in September. They'd go down well again, wouldn't they? Newspaper advertising in May, June, early July and September. The events outlined above, says the circular, proved in 1936 their advertising value to the island. Never before has so much news space been occupied in the principal mainland newspapers. Mainland newspapers, we get away with that now, in the reporting of these events. And this, combined with the BBC broadcasts and newsreel items, is publicity of the right kind, publicity which cannot be bought. The prosperity of Douglas and the island generally must naturally be our greatest desire. The June Effort is every year becoming a bigger factor in its endeavour to attain this prosperity. And the article goes on, quite a lengthy article. We read further on. Mr. J.M. Cubban's generosity, as indicated in the Examiner last week, prospects for the air races this year are exceedingly good, and it is expected that even the great success of last year's events will be surpassed. Mr. J.M. Cubban, the island's most air-travelled man, there's a good moniker to have, is very generously providing the whole of the prize money, amounting to £500, a lot of money in the 1930s, which is £175 more than was offered in 1936. The race from London to Douglas will start from Hanworth Airport, and there will be a compulsory stop on the mainland so that competitors may check their machines and petrol supply before crossing the Irish Sea. The actual channel crossing will, as last year, be between St Bees Head and Mackle Head, and it is hoped to arrange for the sea to be patrolled by a naval vessel and lifeboats, which precautions were taken in 1936. I like the fact it's just hoped, and if it doesn't happen, well, never mind. The finishing point will again be an imaginary line between the Crescent Cinema and a mark boat anchored in the bay. Machines will then proceed to Ronaldsway, where facilities are again being provided by Blackpool and West Coast Air Services. The Manx Air Derby will consist of 3 laps of the island, starting and finishing at Ronaldsway. An innovation this year will be a separate class for the ultra-lightweight machines, such as the Aronka and Hilson Praga. And then there's more on the other attractions. The Highland Gathering sounds fun. We could bring that back. Mr. A. Ronald Bissett, honorary organiser of the Highland Gathering, is maturing his plans for this year's event, which will be the 10th of its kind. He is planning a pageant based on Scott's Lady of the Lake, and negotiations are in progress with a view to obtaining the services of eminent Scottish artistes in the leading roles. In addition to the pageant, there will be the usual features of a Highland Gathering: dancing, pipe band contest, and light and heavy athletic events. Tossing the caber on the Isle of Man. Don't think we've seen that before. Well, we obviously have, but not for some time. 1957, the Isle of Man Times, Friday, August the 2nd. Big drop in visitor numbers. 7,000 fewer came by sea, we read. The biggest drop in sea arrivals so far this season took place last weekend when 32,000 people disembarked at the piers compared with 39,000 for the corresponding period last year. Air arrivals continued to soar and Ronaldsway had another record weekend, but the 7,000 decrease in sea arrivals was set off only to the extent of 451 extra by air. The arrivals by air over the 3 days, July the 26th to the 28th, totalled 5,648, exceeding the previous best arrivals for any weekend, 5,238 during August the 3rd to the 5th, 1956, by 410. The arrivals for the weekend exceeded the return for the same weekend last year by 451. The total number of passengers handled at Ronaldsway on Saturday, 4,901, was also a record for any one day, showing an increase of 183 on the previous best of July the 13th last year. The arrivals on Saturday provided still another record for one day, 2,582, compared with the previous best of 2,472 on the previous Saturday. The coach strike in England and Scotland did not have any effect on the air traffic this weekend. And we read the best routes were Blackpool, Manchester, Liverpool and Prestwick. And finally, the Ramsey Courier, Friday, August the 25th, 1961. Visitor numbers up, but July was over 10,000 down. During the months of May, June and July, the number of passengers handled at Douglas Harbour was 442,575, compared with 436,382 for the same period last year, an increase of 6,193. Arrivals, it lists in May, June and July. So in 1961, May was 23,294, June 85,660, and in July 130,898, compared with 1960, 9,568 in May, 86,617 in June, and 141,290 in July. That's over 11,000 more. An increase of 2,377 passengers, we read. At Ramsey, 2,419 passengers were handled, compared with 3,283 last year, a decrease of 364. Although the arrivals by sea were nearly 9,000 down for July, we read, and total by sea for the months of May, June and July shows an increase of 2,377 at Douglas and a decrease at Ramsey of 468. This is a net increase in the sea figures, 1,909 for the first 3 months of the season. And the article finishes saying, if we add the air figures for the same 3 months, which were 18,257 up, we get a total increase for the season so far of 20,166 on last year. Total arrivals by sea and air for May, June and July have been 323,561. That was in 1961. And we're aiming for, 500,000 by the 2030s, which is sort of getting back to where we were around Victorian times, is it? Is it doable? How do we actually work out the figures of who's here for holiday, who's here just for a day trip, and who's here maybe for a bit of business? I'm not too sure. Whichever way you look at it, though, visitor numbers have always been old news on the island, whether they're up or whether they're down. Until next week, cheerio. You're gonna be yesterday's news.